The darkness of space held no terrors for Commander Zexthal. He stood on the bridge of the Bloodfang, watching the stars drift past through the massive viewing screen. His 8-foot frame cast a long shadow across the metal floor. Sharp claws tapped against the control panel as his yellow eyes scanned the star charts. For 3,000 years, his people had ruled the galaxy. They were the hunters. Everyone else was prey. The Vorthic Empire stretched across hundreds of star systems. Every world they had found, they had conquered. Every species they had met, they had broken. It was the natural order. The strong hunted the weak served the strong. Zexthal had never known defeat. None of his people had. Behind him, the bridge crew worked at their stations. Each warrior bore the scars of countless battles. Their black armor was decorated with trophies from fallen enemies. Teeth, claws, and stranger things hung from their belts. These were the veterans of the 47th Hunting Fleet. They had brought down civilizations that had lasted millions of years. "Commander," called Sub-Leader Vextar from the scanner station, "we are approaching the target system." Zexthal turned toward the younger warrior. Vextar was eager, hungry for his first real hunt. He had studied the reports about this new species. They had found the creatures called themselves humans. They lived on the 3rd planet of a small yellow star. Their technology was primitive. Their weapons were crude. They barely had ships that could travel between stars. "Tell me about these." "Humans again," Zexthal said. He already knew the details, but he enjoyed hearing about new prey. Vextar straightened with pride. "They are bipedal, like us, but smaller and weaker. They have no natural weapons. No claws or fangs. Their skin is soft and easily torn. They die quickly when exposed to vacuum." The other warriors on the bridge made sounds of amusement. Such weak creatures hardly seemed worth the effort. "Their technology?" Zexthal asked. "Basic fusion drives, chemical weapons. Simple energy shields. Our scientists rate them as Tier 7 prey, suitable only for labor camps and the fighting pits." Zexthal nodded. Tier 7 was among the lowest ratings. Most species at that level surrendered within days of first contact. Some even welcomed the Vorthic, hoping that submission would earn them better treatment. It never did. "How many worlds do they control?" The commander asked. 17 confirmed colonies, all lightly defended. Their main fleet appears to be concentrated around their home world. Such a small empire. Zexthal remembered species that had controlled thousands of worlds. They had all fallen in the end. Size meant nothing without strength. The humans would be no different. On the other side of the galaxy, Captain Jake Morrison sat in his office at Earth Defense Command. The reports on his desk made for grim reading. 3 outer colonies had gone silent in the past month. The last. Transmissions had been fragmentary and terrifying. "Captain," his aide knocked on the door. "Dr. Kane is here to see you." "Send her in." Dr. Lisa Kane entered carrying a data pad and looking worried. She was the head of the xenobiology department, and one of the smartest people Jake knew. If she was concerned, then everyone should be. "We have a problem," she said without sitting down. "I have been analyzing the data from the colony blackouts. I think we are dealing with something we have never seen before." Jake gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Tell me." Lisa sat down and activated her datapad. Images appeared in the air above it. "These are the last transmissions from New Haven Colony. Look at this." The image showed a massive ship hanging in space above. The planet. It was dark and angular, covered in what looked like weapon ports. It dwarfed the colony's defense platforms. "The ship appeared without warning," Lisa continued. "No jump signature. No energy buildup. Just suddenly there. Our sensors could not detect it until it was right on top of them. Jake studied the image. The ship looked wrong somehow. It was too aggressive, like a weapon designed by something that thought only of violence. How big is it? Initial estimates put it at over 5 kilometers long. That makes it larger than anything in our fleet. Jake felt a chill. Earth's largest battleship was barely half that size. There's more, Lisa said. She changed the image. Now it showed glimpses of the attackers themselves. They were tall and covered in dark armor. Their movements were too fast, too fluid. These creatures boarded the colony station. They cut through our security forces like they were not even there. The next image made Jake's blood run cold. It showed one of the creatures holding a human colonist by the throat. The alien was nearly twice the human size. Its eyes glowed yellow in the darkness. They are not trying to conquer us quickly, Lisa said. They are studying us, testing our responses, like a predator learning about new prey. Jake pushed back from his desk. In 30 years of military service, he had never faced anything like this. Humans had fought each other for centuries, but this was different. This was something that saw humans as food. How many of them are there? He asked. Unknown. But based on the ship sizes we have detected, potentially thousands, maybe more. Back on the Bloodfang, Zexthal reviewed the initial attack reports. The human colonies had fallen as expected. Their defenses were pathetic. Their weapons barely scratched Vorthic armor. Most of the colonists had died quickly once the warriors boarded their stations. But something bothered him. The humans had not surrendered immediately. Even when facing certain death, they had continued fighting. Some had even attacked his warriors with their bare hands. It was pointless, but unexpected. Sub-leader, he called the Vextar. What did? You think of the human resistance? The younger warrior considered the question. They fought longer than predicted. Some continued attacking, even after receiving mortal wounds. It was unusual. Zexthal had seen many species fight to the end. Usually it was because they did not understand how outmatched they were. Once they realized the truth, they broke. But these humans seemed to understand perfectly well that they were going to die. They fought anyway. Interesting. Prepare the fleet for the next phase, Zexthal ordered. We will strike at their larger colonies. See how they respond when the stakes are higher. On Earth, emergency meetings ran around the clock. Military leaders from every nation gathered to plan humanity's defense. The enemy was unlike anything they had prepared for. Their technology was centuries ahead of human science. Their ships were faster and more powerful. Their soldiers were stronger and better armed. General Patricia Stone stood before the assembled officers. She had been chosen to lead the unified Earth Defense Force. It was not a job she had wanted, but it was the job humanity needed her to do. We are facing an enemy that has conquered hundreds of worlds, she told them. They have been doing this for thousands of years. We have weeks, maybe days, before they reach Earth. The room was silent. Everyone understood what that meant. But we have advantages they do not expect, Stone continued. We know this solar system better than they do. We know how humans fight when their backs are against the wall. And we have something they have never faced before. What's that? Asked. One of the admirals. Stone smiled grimly. A species that refuses to be prey. In the depths of space, the Vorthic fleet moved toward human territory. They had no doubt about the outcome. They had done this too many times before. The humans would fight, they would lose, and they would serve. It was the natural order. But in the corridors of their ships, some of the younger warriors whispered about the strange behavior they had seen. Prey that fought back, creatures that chose death over surrender. It made no sense according to everything they had been taught. Zexthal dismissed such concerns. Every species had its quirks. The humans would break like all the others. They always did. The warning alarm screamed across New Haven Colony as the Vorthik hunting fleet dropped out of hyperspace. Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Hayes watched from the command center as massive alien ships appeared on the sensor screens. There were 12 of them, each one larger than anything in the human fleet. "All defense platforms, prepare for combat," Ryan ordered into his communications headset. His voice was steady, but his hands shook slightly as he gripped the control panel. He had trained for this moment, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality of facing an enemy this powerful. The colony's defense consisted of 6 armed platforms and 23 patrol ships. Against a normal human fleet, it would have been adequate protection. Against the Vorthik, it looked pitiful. "Sir, they're not responding to our communications," reported Lieutenant Kelly Davis from the communications station. "We've tried all frequencies." Ryan was not surprised. The reports from the other colonies had mentioned the same thing. The aliens did not negotiate. They did not make demands. They simply attacked. "All ships, this is Hayes," he broadcast to the defense fleet. "Remember your training. Protect the evacuation transports. Make every shot count." The Vorthik ships moved with deadly grace through the asteroid field that surrounded New Haven. Their dark hulls seemed to absorb light, making them hard to track against the black of space. Energy weapons flickered along their sides like the eyes of hunting beasts. On the bridge of the Bloodfang, Commander Zexthul watched the human preparations with mild interest. The prey had arranged themselves in a defensive formation around their colony. Their ships were small and crude, but they moved with purpose. "Begin the attack," he ordered. The Vorthik fleet opened fire. Beams of crimson energy lanced out across space, striking the human defense platforms. The first platform exploded immediately, its shields collapsing under the alien weapons. The second managed to return fire before it too was destroyed, but the human ships did not retreat. Instead, they accelerated toward the Vorthik fleet, firing everything they had. Their weapons barely scratched the alien armor, but they kept coming. "Interesting," Zexthul murmured. Most prey species tried to run when they saw how outmatched they were. These humans were flying straight into certain death. The battle was hopelessly one-sided. Human ships exploded one after another under the Vorthik guns. But each one took time to kill, and some managed to score hits on the alien vessels. Nothing that caused real damage, but enough to show that the humans were not going to die quietly. "Lieutenant." Colonel Hayes watched his fleet die around him. His flagship, the Defender, was one of the last ships still fighting. Smoke filled the bridge as damaged systems sparked and failed. "Sir, we've lost main power," reported his engineering officer. "Weapons are offline." Ryan looked at the tactical display. Only 3 human ships were still alive, and they were all badly damaged. The evacuation transports had made it to hyperspace, carrying most of the colony's civilians to safety. His job was done. "All remaining ships, this is Hayes," he said over the radio. "It has been an honor serving with you. Continue the mission." The Vorthik boarding shuttles launched from their motherships like a swarm of metal insects. They latched onto the hulls of the disabled human vessels and began cutting through the armor. Within minutes, Vorthik warriors were inside the human ships. Private Danny Foster crouched behind an overturned table in the corridor of the transport ship Mercy. He was 19 years old and had never been in real combat before. His rifle felt heavy in his hands as he listened to the sound of the aliens cutting through the hull. The wall exploded inward in a shower of sparks and molten metal. The first Vorthik warrior stepped through the hole, and Danny got his first close look at humanity's enemy. The creature was enormous, nearly 8 feet tall and covered in black armor that seemed to move like living shadow. Its yellow eyes glowed in the dim emergency lighting. Claws extended from its fingers, each one longer than Danny's thumb. Danny opened fire. His rifle spat bullets at the alien warrior, but they bounced off its armor like raindrops. The creature turned toward him with what might have been amusement. More Vorthik poured through the breach. Danny kept firing even as they advanced down the corridor. He knew he was going to die, but he also knew that every second he delayed them was another second for the civilians to reach the escape pods. The first warrior reached him and knocked the rifle from his hands with casual ease. Danny pulled his sidearm and emptied the clip into the creature's chest. The bullets had no effect. The alien grabbed him by the throat and lifted him off the ground. Danny looked into those glowing yellow eyes and saw something he had not expected. The creature was not angry or hungry. It was curious, like it was studying him. "Why do you continue to fight?" the alien asked in perfect English. Its voice was like grinding stone. "You cannot win." Danny managed to smile, despite the claws around his throat. "Because we're human," he said. "It's what we do." The Vorthik warrior tilted its head, considering this answer. Then it tightened its grip, but Danny was not finished. With his last breath, he activated the grenade he had pulled from his belt. The explosion tore through the corridor, killing both human and alien. Similar scenes played out across the remaining human ships. The Vorthik warriors found themselves facing an enemy that refused to surrender. Humans fought with knives when their guns ran out. They used tools and furniture as weapons. Some even used their bare hands. On the medical ship Hope, Chief Medical Officer Dr. Corinne Wright barricaded herself in the surgical ward with 30 wounded soldiers. When the Vorthik broke through the doors, they found not helpless patients, but fighters who had turned medical equipment into weapons. Dr. Wright herself wielded a surgical laser, cutting through alien armor with precise strikes. She managed, to kill 2 Vorthik warriors before they brought her down. Her last words, transmitted over the ship's intercom, became legendary among human forces. "They bleed," she said as alien claws tore through her chest. "Remember that. They bleed, which means we can kill them." The battle ended with the complete destruction of the human fleet. Every ship was either destroyed or captured. Every human fighter was dead. By any military standard, it was a total Vorthik victory. But Commander Zexthal found himself troubled as he walked through the captured human vessels. His warriors reported strange behavior from the prey. They had continued fighting even when mortally wounded. Some had chosen to destroy themselves rather than be taken alive. In 3,000 years of conquest, Zexthal had never seen anything like it. "Sub-Leader Vextar," he called to his second-in-command. "What are our casualties?" The younger warrior consulted his datapad. 43 dead, 112 wounded. Higher than predicted. Much higher. The humans had been outnumbered 50-1 and outgunned by an even greater margin. They should not have been able to inflict such losses. The prey fought with unusual determination, Vextar continued. Some continued attacking even after receiving fatal wounds. Our medical teams are baffled by their behavior. Zexthal walked to the viewing port and looked out at the debris field that had once been the human fleet. Among the wreckage, he could see the bodies of human fighters drifting in space. Even in death, many still clutched their weapons. On Earth, the news of New Haven's fall sent shockwaves through human space, but it was not the defeat that captured people's attention. It was the final transmission from Private Danny Foster, recorded by his helmet camera and broadcast across every human world. "They bleed, which means we can kill them." Those words became a rallying cry. Recruitment centers were overwhelmed with volunteers. Factory workers put in extra shifts to build weapons and ships. For the first time since the crisis began, humans had hoped. General Patricia Stone stood before the assembled military leaders in the war room deep beneath Geneva. The holographic display showed the current positions of both fleets. "The enemy is advancing on the Kepler system," she reported. "They will reach it in 6 days. We have 48 hours to get our reinforcements in position." Admiral Frank Carson, commander of the Third Fleet, raised his hand. "General, with respect, we're still outgunned 3-1. Even with our best tactics, we can't win a straight fight." Stone nodded. "Then we don't fight straight. We adapt, we learn. We make them pay for every inch of space." She activated a new display showing tactical analysis of the New Haven battle. "Our people learned something important. These aliens can be hurt. They can be killed. They're not gods. They're just another enemy." The room was silent as the officers studied the data. Despite the overwhelming odds, there was something different in their expressions now. Before New Haven, they had been preparing for a hopeless last stand. Now, they were planning for War. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, the Vorthic fleet continued its advance toward human territory. But in the warrior quarters, there were whispered conversations that would have been unthinkable weeks before. The prey that fought back, the creatures that chose death over surrender, the enemy that looked at gods and saw only something to kill. For the first time in their long history, some Vorthic warriors began to feel something they had no name for: fear. 3 weeks after the battle at New Haven, the war had changed in ways that neither side had expected. Major Katie Sullivan guided her small strike force through the asteroid field near the Kepler system, watching the long-range sensors for any sign of Vorthic patrols. Her fleet consisted of 12 fast attack ships, each one smaller than a Vorthic shuttle, but much more maneuverable. The human military had learned quickly that fighting the aliens head-on was suicide. Instead, they had developed new tactics based on speed and surprise. "Contact," whispered Lieutenant Sam Cooper from the sensor station. "Single Vorthic cruiser, bearing 2-7-Mark-4. Katie studied the tactical display. The alien ship was alone, separated from the main fleet by several million kilometers. It was exactly the kind of target they had been looking for. "All ships, this is Sullivan. Begin attack pattern Delta. Remember, hit fast and get out. We're not here to win a battle. We're here to make them bleed." The human ships spread out in a wide formation, approaching the Vorthic cruiser from multiple angles. Their weapons were still inferior to the alien technology, but concentrated fire from 12 ships could penetrate even Vorthic armor. The alien vessel detected them when they were still 30,000 kilometers away. Its massive guns swiveled toward the approaching human fleet, but the small ships were already changing course, weaving between asteroids and debris. Katie's ship, the Wasp, dove under the cruiser's firing arc, while her wingmen attacked from above. Plasma bolts seared through space around them, but the human pilots had learned to read Vorthic firing patterns. They knew when to dodge and when to attack. "All ships, concentrate fire on the engine section," Katie ordered. "Make it count." 24 missiles streaked toward the alien cruiser. Half of them were destroyed by defensive fire, but the rest found their target. Explosions bloomed along the ship's hull as human weapons tore through alien armor. The Vorthic cruiser shuddered under the assault. For a moment, its engines flickered and died. Then the ship began to list to one side, trailing atmosphere and debris. "Target is disabled," reported Cooper. "Should we finish it?" Katie was tempted, but she knew better. Other Vorthic ships would be responding to the distress signal. Negative. All ships withdraw. Mission accomplished. The human fleet scattered back into the asteroid field, leaving the damaged cruiser behind. It would survive, but it would need major repairs. More importantly, it would carry news of the attack back to the Vorthic command. On the bridge of the Bloodfang, Commander Zexthul read the latest battle reports with growing concern. In the past 3 weeks, his forces had suffered 12 similar attacks. The humans were not trying to win major battles. Instead, they were picking off isolated ships and supply convoys. They are adapting their tactics, observed Sub-Leader Vexstar, learning from each engagement. Zexthul nodded grimly. The prey was behaving in ways that defied everything he knew about conquest. Most species either fought desperately to defend their territory or fled to the outer edges of their space. The humans were doing neither. They were hunting. Sub-Leader, what is the status of our supply lines? Vexstar consulted his data pad. 7 convoys have been attacked in the past week. Losses are within acceptable parameters, but the delays are affecting our advance schedule. The delays were the real problem. The Vorthic Empire had conquered the galaxy by maintaining momentum. They struck fast and hard, crushing resistance before it could organize. But the humans were forcing them to slow down, to worry about protecting their rear areas. And morale? Zexthul asked the question he dreaded. Some warriors are beginning to ask questions, Vexstar admitted. They wonder why the prey continues to fight when defeat is certain. Zexthul had wondered the same thing. In 3 millennia of conquest, no species had ever maintained this level of resistance after suffering major defeats. The humans should have been demoralized by now, ready to surrender in exchange for mercy. Instead, they seemed to be getting stronger. Back on Earth, Captain Steve Parker prepared for the most dangerous mission of his life. His team had been selected for a special operation that could change the course of the war. If they succeeded, humanity would gain access to Vorthic technology and intelligence. If they failed, they would all die horribly. Remember, we only have one shot at this, Parker told his team as they suited up in the shuttle bay. The moment we board that ship, every Vorthic in the system will be hunting us. Sergeant Lucy Chun checked her demolition charges one final time. How long do we need to hold the command center? 15 minutes, replied Corporal Tony Martinez, their communications specialist. That's how long it will take me to download their database. The target was a Vorthic command ship that had been damaged in a recent battle. It was limping toward a repair facility, escorted by only 2 smaller vessels. Intelligence suggested that its crew was operating on minimum power to preserve life support. Parker's shuttle approached the alien vessel from its blind spot, using the ship's own hull to mask their approach. The human vessel was painted to look like space debris, complete with scorch marks and fake battle damage. Docking in 30 seconds, announced the pilot. Remember, once we're inside, there's no going back. The shuttle latched onto the Vorthic ship's hull and began cutting through the armor plating. Within minutes, the humans were inside the alien vessel, moving through corridors that seemed designed for creatures much larger than themselves. The ship's interior was dark and humid, with a strange organic quality that made Parker's skin crawl. The walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own, and the air tasted of copper and ozone. This way, whispered Martinez, consulting his scanner. The command center should be 3 levels up. They encountered their first Vorthic warrior at the junction of 2 corridors. The alien was wounded, moving slowly due to injuries sustained in the earlier battle. Parker's team took it down with concentrated fire before it could raise an alarm. Poor bastard, muttered Chun as they stepped over the body. Almost felt sorry for it. Parker said nothing, but he understood what she meant. Up close, the Vorthic looked less like monsters and more like soldiers doing their job. It was easier to fight them when they seemed like evil demons from space. The command center was a vast chamber filled with holographic displays and control panels. 3 Vorthic technicians worked at the central console, unaware of the human intrusion, until it was too late. Martinez went to work immediately, connecting his portable computer to the alien systems. I'm in, he reported. But their security is trying to lock me out. I need more time. You've got it, Parker said, positioning his team around the entrances. Chun, seal those doors. Nothing gets through. The demolitions expert placed charges at each entrance, while Parker and the others set up defensive positions. They had barely finished when the first Vorthok response team arrived. The battle for the command center was brutal and close quarters. The humans had superior cover and better knowledge of the terrain, but the Vorthok had raw strength and numbers. Plasma bolts filled the air as both sides fought desperately. Chun held the main entrance single-handedly for 8 minutes, using her remaining charges to collapse part of the corridor. When her position was finally overrun, she activated a grenade that took out half a dozen Vorthok warriors. Download complete, Martinez announced, just as enemy fire found his position. I've got everything. Parker looked around the command center. Half his team was dead or wounded, and more Vorthok were on the way. But they had accomplished their mission. The intelligence they had gathered could give humanity the edge it needed. All teams, this is Parker. Mission complete. Execute extraction. Protocol Omega. The extraction protocol was simple. There was no extraction. The team would fight to the last man to protect the intelligence data, while Martinez transmitted everything back to Earth. As Vorthok warriors poured into the command center, Parker smiled grimly. They had done the impossible. They had stolen. The secrets of the galaxy's apex predators, Dr. Lisa Kane, worked frantically in her laboratory beneath Geneva, analyzing the data that Captain Parker's team had died to obtain. The Vorthok database contained detailed information about their technology, their tactics, and most importantly, their biology. This is incredible, she told General Stone over the secure video link. They're not as invincible as they seem. Their enhanced abilities come from biological implants that can be disrupted. Stone leaned forward in her chair. Disrupted how? Electromagnetic pulses at specific frequencies. I'm working on a prototype weapon now, but I need more time to test it. How much time? Kane looked at her calculations. 2 weeks, maybe 3. But General, there's something else. The database contains records of their other conquests. We're not the first species to fight back this hard. Stone frowned. What happened? To the others? They were destroyed. Completely. When the Vorthok encounter serious resistance, they don't just conquer. They exterminate. The implications were chilling. If humanity continued to resist, the Vorthok might decide that humans were too dangerous to be allowed to live. But as Stone looked at the latest casualty reports, she realized that extinction might be preferable to surrender. The humans who had died at New Haven and Kepler had shown the galaxy something important. They had proven that the Vorthok could be hurt. Admiral Helen Garcia stood on the bridge of the battleship Liberty, watching the largest human fleet ever assembled prepare for battle. 200 ships stretched out in formation around the gas giant Kronos, where the Vorthok had established their main staging area. This would be the decisive battle of the war. Admiral, all ships report ready for combat, announced her communications officer, Lieutenant Bob Taylor. The new frequency weapons are loaded and calibrated. Garcia nodded, feeling the weight of humanity's hopes on her shoulders. Dr. Kane's breakthrough had given them a weapon that could level the playing field, but they had never tested it in large-scale combat. Today would prove whether human science could overcome Vorthok superiority. Signal the fleet, Garcia ordered. All ships advance. Today we find out who really rules this galaxy. The human fleet moved toward Kronos like a wave of metal and energy. At its heart were the big battleships, bristling with the new frequency cannons that could disrupt Vorthok biological implants. Around them flew squadrons of fighters and destroyers, ready to exploit any advantage the new weapons might create. The Bloodfang, Commander Zexthil, watched the approaching human armada with a mixture of respect and concern. The prey had grown bold since their early victories. They no longer fled when his ships appeared. Instead, they came hunting. "Commander, the enemy fleet is larger than our intelligence predicted," reported Subleader Vexstar. "They have brought everything." Zexthul studied the tactical display. The humans had committed their entire military to this battle. If they lost here, the resistance would collapse. If they won, the Vorthek Empire would face its first major defeat in 3,000 years. "Then we must not disappoint them," Zexthil said. "Signal the fleet. All ships engage. Show these humans why we rule the galaxy." The two fleets collided near the outer rings of Kronos in a battle that would last 3 days. The opening exchange was devastating for both sides. Vorthik plasma cannons tore through human armor, while the new frequency weapons played havoc with alien ship systems. Captain Nia Rodriguez commanded the heavy cruiser Thunder, one of the first ships to test the frequency weapons in combat. Her target was a Vorthek destroyer that had been harassing the human formation. "Frequency cannons charged and ready," reported her weapons officer, Ensign Pete Williams. "Target locked." "Fire," Rodriguez ordered. The frequency beam struck the Vorthik ship like invisible lightning. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the alien vessel began to drift, its weapons falling silent and its engines shutting down. "Direct hit," Williams announced with excitement. "Their systems are completely offline." Rodriguez allowed herself a small smile. The new weapons worked. For the first time in the war, humans had a technological advantage over their enemies. But the Vorthik adapted quickly. Within hours, they had modified their shields to deflect the frequency weapons. The battle became a grinding slugfest as both fleets hammered each other with CONVENTIONIL weapons. The turning point came on the second day when a group of Vorthik boarding shuttles broke through the human defensive screen. Their target was the Liberty itself, the flagship of the human fleet. Rodriguez watched from the Thunder as the alien shuttles attached themselves to the Liberty's hull. "Admiral Garcia is in trouble," she told her crew. "Prepare for boarding." Action! The Thunder maneuvered alongside the Liberty, and Rodriguez led her Marines across the gap between ships. They found the flagship's corridors filled with smoke and the sounds of fierce fighting. Admiral Garcia's security team was fighting a desperate battle against Vorthik warriors in the main hangar bay. The aliens had carved through the ship's defenses like a knife through paper, but they had not counted on facing the Thunder's Marine Company. Sergeant Paul Brooks kicked open the hangar doors and led his squad into the battle. The new frequency weapons worked even better against individual Vorthik warriors than against ships. The aliens' enhanced reflexes and strength failed them when their biological implants were disrupted. "Keep firing," Brooks shouted to his men. "Don't let them adapt." The battle raged through the Liberty's corridors for 6 hours. Human Marines used their superior knowledge of the ship's layout to trap and isolate groups of Vorthik warriors. Without their enhanced abilities, the aliens were still dangerous, but they were no longer invincible. Corporal Amy Johnson found herself face to face with a Vorthik warrior in the ship's armory. The alien was 8 feet tall and covered in scars from a dozen battles. Its yellow eyes burned with rage as it realized its claws could not penetrate her armor. "Not so tough now, are you?" Johnson said, raising her frequency rifle. The Vorthik warrior snarled something in its own language and charged. Johnson's shot caught its center mass, disrupting its implants and sending it crashing to the floor. For the first time in the war, a human had defeated a Vorthik warrior in single combat. Word of the victory spread through the human fleet like wildfire. If Amy Johnson could bring down one of the galaxy's apex predators, then anyone could. The psychological effect was enormous. But the real shock came when Commander Zexthil himself led a boarding party against the Thunder. The Vorthik commander had grown tired of watching his warriors fail against the new human weapons. He would show them how a true hunter fought. Captain Rodriguez met him in the Thunder's command center, surrounded by her bridge crew. She was smaller than the alien commander, less experienced in battle, but she had something Zexthil had never faced before. She had no fear of him. "You must be their leader," Zexthil said in perfect English. His voice carried the authority of 3 millennia of conquest. "I am Commander Zexthil of the 47th Hunting Fleet. Surrender now, and your death will be swift." Rodriguez drew her sidearm, a modified frequency pistol that Dr. Kane had designed specifically for close combat. "I'm Captain Nina Rodriguez of the Earth Defense Force, and you picked the wrong ship to board." The fight that followed would be remembered in both human and Vorthik history. Zexthil was faster, stronger, and more experienced than Rodriguez. His claws could tear through metal, and his reflexes were enhanced by centuries of genetic modification. But Rodriguez had something the Vorthik commander had never encountered. She had trained to fight an enemy that was superior in every way except one. She refused to be intimidated. The frequency pistol disrupted Zexthil's implants with every shot, slowing his reflexes and weakening his enhanced strength. Rodriguez used the Thunder's corridors and equipment to her advantage, turning the alien's size against him. The battle lasted 20 minutes and ranged through half the ship. In the end, Rodriguez cornered Zexthil in the engineering section, where the ship's power core provided cover and concealment. "You cannot win," Zexthil gasped, his yellow eyes dimming as his implants failed. "My people have ruled for 3,000 years." Rodriguez kept her weapon trained on him. "Then it's time for a change in management." The final shot echoed through the Thunder's corridors. Commander Zexthil, the terror of 100 worlds, fell to the deck of a human warship. The age of Vorthik supremacy was over. News of Zexthil's death spread through both fleets within hours. For the humans, it was proof that their enemies could be defeated. For the Vorthik, it was a psychological catastrophe that shattered their way. Confidence. Subleader Vextar, now in command of the Bloodfang, found himself facing something no Vorthik commander had ever dealt with. A fleet that was no longer certain of victory. "Commander, the warrior caste is requesting permission to withdraw," reported his second-in-command. "They say the prey has become too dangerous." Vextar looked at the tactical display. The human fleet was pressing its advantage, using their frequency weapons to disable Vorthik ships faster than they could adapt. For the first time in their history, a Vorthik fleet was losing a major battle. "Signal retreat," Vextar ordered, the words bitter in his mouth. "All ships withdraw to the outer system." The retreat became a rout as human ships pursued the fleeing Vorthik fleet. Captain Rodriguez, now commanding the combined human task force, showed no mercy. Her ships harried the aliens all the way to the edge of the system. "Admiral Garcia, we've won," Rodriguez reported over the communication system. "The enemy is in full retreat." Garcia, recovering from her wounds in the Liberty's medical bay, smiled despite the pain. "Send a message to Earth. Tell them the hunters have become the hunted." Back on Earth, the news of victory at Kronos sparked celebrations around the world. For the first time since the war began, humans believed they could win. The species that had terrorized the galaxy for 3 millennia was running from human weapons. But in the depths of space, the retreating Vorthik fleet carried with it something more dangerous than any weapon. They carried fear. Fear of an enemy that refused to be prey. Fear of creatures that could look at gods and see only another target. The Vorthik Empire, built on the foundation of absolute superiority, began to crack. Some factions called for total war against the humans. Others demanded withdrawal from human space entirely. The predators were learning what it felt like to be afraid. and in the command centers of human ships throughout the galaxy, officers like Captain Rodriguez and Admiral Garcia planned their next moves. They had tasted victory, and they wanted more. The galaxy's apex predators had made a fatal mistake. They had taught humans how to hunt. 6 months after the Battle of Kronos, Fleet Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the flagship Liberty, watching human ships patrol the skies above the former Vorthic capital world. The massive alien city stretched out below them, its dark towers now flying human flags alongside banners from dozens of liberated species. The war was over, but the work of peace had only just begun. Admiral were receiving surrender requests from 3 more Vorthic colonies, reported Captain David Wilson, his new chief of staff. That brings the total to 47 systems that have asked for protection. Morrison nodded, but his expression remained troubled. The speed of the Vorthic collapse had surprised everyone. Once their fleet at Kronos broke, the entire empire seemed to fall apart like a house of cards. Some Vorthic forces had fought to the bitter end, but many others had simply laid down their weapons and waited for human ships to arrive. "What's the status of the refugee camps?" Morrison asked. "Overcrowded," Wilson admitted. "We have nearly 2 million Vorthic civilians who fled the fighting. They're afraid their own people will kill them for surrendering." The Admiral walked to the viewport and looked down at the alien city. Somewhere in those streets were creatures who had once terrorized the galaxy. Now they cowered in fear of their former slaves. The irony was not lost on him. And the liberation fleets? Commander Rachel Stone's task force has freed 12 more worlds this week. The slave species are organizing their own governments, but many are asking for human protection. Morrison understood their fear. For thousands of years, these species had lived under Vorthic rule. Freedom was something they had forgotten how to handle. Some were adapting quickly, but others seemed paralyzed by the choices they now faced. Doctor. Lisa Kane entered the observation deck carrying a thick report. Her research team had been studying the Vorthic Empire's records for months, trying to understand how such a powerful civilization had collapsed so completely. "Admiral, I have the final analysis you requested," she said, setting the report on a nearby table. "The answer is more disturbing than we thought." Morrison gestured for her to continue. Kane activated a holographic display showing the structure of Vorthic society. Their entire culture was built around the idea of absolute dominance, she explained. For 3,000 years, they never faced serious resistance. They had no concept of military failure or strategic retreat. The display showed battle records from across the galaxy. Every Vorthic victory had been complete and overwhelming. They had never learned to adapt to setbacks, because they had never experienced any. When we proved they could be defeated, their whole worldview collapsed, Kane continued. They literally did not know how to process the concept of losing to their prey. Morrison studied the data. It explained a lot about the strange behavior they had observed. Some Vorthic warriors had committed suicide rather than face defeat. Others had fled to the far edges of the galaxy, abandoning their posts without orders. "What about the ones who are still fighting?" "Fanatics mostly," Kane replied. "The younger generation who refuse to accept that the old order is gone. But they're scattered and disorganized. Most of the veteran commanders either died at Kronos or surrendered afterward." The door opened and Captain Nina Rodriguez entered, her arm still in a medical support brace from her fight with Zex Thul. She had become something of a legend since the battle, the human who had killed the galaxy's most feared predator in single combat. "Admiral, we've received a communication from the Outer Rim territories," she reported. 3 Vorthic war clans have formed an alliance. They're calling themselves the True Hunt in vowing to restore the Empire. Morrison frowned. "How many ships do they have?" "Intelligence estimates about 60 vessels, plus ground forces on a dozen worlds." Not enough to threaten us directly, but they could cause problems for the liberated worlds. It was the problem Morrison had been expecting. The Vorthic Empire was too large to collapse completely overnight. There would be remnants, holdouts who refused to accept the new reality. Some might be negotiated with, but others would have to be dealt with by force. "Prepare a task force," Morrison ordered. "We'll handle the True Hunt ourselves. We can't let them terrorize the species we've liberated." Rodriguez saluted. "Yes, sir." The crews are eager for another chance at the Vorthic. That was another change Morrison had noticed. The human military had developed a taste for hunting their former hunters. The psychological tables had turned completely. Now it was human ships that prowled the galaxy, seeking out Vorthic holdouts with the same relentless determination the aliens had once shown. On the bridge of the Bloodfang, Sub-Leader Vextar read the latest reports from across what remained of the Empire. The news was uniformly bad. Another colony had surrendered to the humans. Another fleet had been destroyed trying to protect a slave world. Another commander had chosen death over defeat. "Sub-Leader, we're receiving a transmission from War Chief Kexmal," announced his communications officer. "He's calling for all loyal forces to gather at the Nexus Point." Vextar knew about Kexmal and his True Hunt movement. The old war chief refused to accept that the Empire was finished. He believed that gathering the scattered fleets could somehow restore Vorthic dominance. "Signal our response," Vextar said after a long pause. "Tell him we will not be joining his crusade." The communications officer looked shocked. "Sub-Leader, you heard me? The hunt is over. We lost. Continuing to fight will only bring more death to our people." It was a decision that would have been unthinkable a year ago. A Vorthic warrior choosing surrender over battle. But Vextar had seen too much. He had watched the humans fight at Kronos. He had seen them turn the galaxy's apex predators into refugees and outcasts. The humans were not just another prey species. They were something new, something the Vorthic had never encountered in 3 millennia of conquest. They were predators, who specialized in hunting other predators. 3 weeks later, the human task force found War Chief Kexmal's fleet gathered around a dead star system called the Nexus Point. The True Hunt had assembled 43 ships, the largest Vorthic force since Kronos. They were making their last stand in the ruins of an ancient battlefield. Admiral Morrison commanded the attack personally, leading 50 human ships into battle against the fanatics. The fight was brief but vicious. The Vorthic fought with desperate courage, but their tactics had not evolved since the early days of the war. They still believed that raw aggression could overcome human technology and tactics. They were wrong. Captain Rodriguez led the boarding action against Kexmal's flagship, just as she had against the Bloodfang. But this time, she was not alone. Human Marines poured through the alien ship's corridors, their frequency weapons disrupting Vorthic implants and turning the hunters into ordinary mortals. War Chief Kexmal made his final stand in his ship's war room, surrounded by the banners of 1,000 conquered worlds. When Rodriguez found him, he was seated on his command throne, staring at a hologram of the old empire. "You have destroyed everything," he said without looking at her. 3,000 years of order gone because of one stubborn prey species. Rodriguez kept her weapon trained on him. "Your order was built on slavery and murder. Maybe it deserved to be destroyed." Kexmal finally turned to face her. His yellow eyes were dim with exhaustion and defeat. "What will you do with us now? Will you hunt us as we hunted others?" "That depends on you," Rodriguez replied. "The humans who surrender will be treated fairly. The ones who continue fighting will be stopped." The old war chief considered this for a long moment. Then he deactivated his weapons and placed them on the floor. "I surrender," he said simply. "The True Hunt is finished." With Kexmal's surrender, organized Vorthic resistance finally ended. The scattered remnants of the Empire either fled to distant galaxies or submitted to human authority. The age of the hunters was over. A year later, Admiral Morrison stood once again on the observation deck of the Liberty, but this time he was looking at something very different. Below them stretched a space station unlike any ever built, a massive structure where dozens of species worked together as equals. The Galactic Council had been Dr. Kane's idea. Instead of replacing the Vorthic Empire with a human one, she had proposed something new. A coalition of free worlds where each species had a voice and no one ruled over anyone else. "Admiral, the morning briefing is ready," announced Captain Wilson. "We have reports from 14 sectors and requests for assistance from 6 more worlds." Morrison smiled. The work never ended, but it was good work. Protecting the weak instead of preying on them. Building instead of destroying. It was a better way to rule the galaxy. "Any word from the Vorthic territories?" he asked, sub-leader. "Vextar's government is making progress," Wilson reported. "They've established democratic councils on 12 worlds and opened trade negotiations with 3 neighboring species." Not all the Vorthic had adapted to the new order, but enough had that Morrison remained hopeful. Even apex predators could learn to be something else when they had no choice. As he walked toward the briefing room, Morrison reflected on how much had changed. A year ago, humanity had been fighting for survival against an enemy that seemed invincible. Now they were the dominant power in their region of the galaxy, responsible for protecting dozens.